All right, so it's the second week of the course. I hope everybody's doing well. Obviously, we're getting a little bit of not a little bit, a lot of rain. So I'm actually recording this a day early, day or two early to take advantage of the fact I can't do much else. Anyway, I'm hoping to get a little more summer in like the rest of us. Tonight we're going to talk about budgeting. We're going to talk about some financial documents that you might have for personal use. And yeah, we'll kind of look at some big picture things as well. In terms of the course, obviously you found where the lectures are. I think most of you figured out how to appropriately, go in there and put a sentence or two regarding the extra video. Books are always a hassle, but again, I'm not shilling for the book companies. Get a copy of the book by the most, expeditious and cheapest means possible. Questions wise, I'll try and sort that out in terms of the mismatch sometimes between the page numbers over the various editions. But we'll get that going. I fully appreciate, if you guys haven't figured it out, I'm kind of in the I'm not a very very typical boomer, that's for sure, because I'm pretty deep in crypto and some other stuff. But I fully appreciate the challenges of, and again, this is speaking to the typical college student generation. I realize there's maybe a boomer student or two out there, but for most of you, yeah, you've got some serious financial challenges ahead of you, and I'm not taking it lightly, although I'm laughing. But I mean, it's there's some issues with the current financial system, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that boomers vote, and boomers have a lot of money invested, and so not even invested so much. A lot of them are just savers, and like I said, what we need to do is transform most of you from being spenders down in the, and I don't mean it pejoratively, but down in the poor range, kind of through the middle class. The middle class are the folks who just save money, and into the investor class, which will hopefully end up with you with some wealth. But the situation we've got with the country is obviously the country owes a lot of money. That debt is very expensive to finance, and there's some sad facts that if that debt could kind of go away, obviously it would make things better for the politicians. Well, you can't really. That is so huge. But if you can lessen the debt by inflating the currency and doing some other things, debasing the currency actually, to make the dollars owed on it less significant. And it's, if I owe $1 million 30 years from now, I'm not one bit worried about it, because $1 million 30 years from now is not going to be a big chunk of money. And so, anyway, some concepts we kind of need to talk about. Fiat money, the dollar is an example of fiat money. The dollar used to be, way back when, backed by gold, as most currencies were, but now it's what you call a fiat currency. Fiat as in, a decree or whatever. It's just set up by the government. It doesn't have, you can't get your dollar and go say, I need a certain amount of physical gold or something like that. And again, I'm not a gold bug either. I'm not somebody who wants to hoard gold. Gold's not a bad investment, but it's more of a savings vehicle. It doesn't really do as well as other investments in my mind. Currency debasement is this sort of, it's a deliberate policy. It's not something that just sort of happens. Debasement means, back when they used to have coins, they would, it was supposed to be a silver coin. Like even we did this, like dimes. If you had a true dime from back in the day that was pure silver, it's worth a whole lot more than a dime. And so they start putting in other metals, or they lighten the coins, or they do other things. In modern times, as this definition says, banks, when you're dealing with a fiat currency where it's not tied to a direct valuable an asset, you can just sort of pump more money in. And debasement is related to inflation. So debasement would be kind of like having a cold, and inflation would be sort of the sneeze or the sniffles, more of a symptom. It's and inflation, again, it's the definition is sort of included there in terms of inflation, in terms of the money supply grows. Well, there's only so many goods and services out there in the world, so now you have a greater amount of money out there to essentially purchase that same amount of goods and services. Therefore, the vendors, the sellers, the whatever, they can get and they have to get more for their products, because now the currency is not worth as much. The reason why this ties back to boomers is boomers would freak out if they knew the true currency debasement. When they look on their bank statement and they say, "Oh, I'm getting 5%. I'm winning. I'm knocking it out of the park." They wouldn't be as happy if they knew that if you added in inflation and the larger currency debasement, the actual hurdle rate, the amount you actually have to earn to maintain, even in terms of buying power and all that, is a lot of estimates put it at about 14%. It's pretty darn high, and so it's kind of a problem. It's got people doing some what some people would consider drastic and some people would consider reasonable situations in terms of alternate currencies like crypto and other things. I'm not some crypto evangelist. Do not go out and run and buy crypto because the professor said that's a great idea. If you wanted to buy a small portion, not on credit, because it's super valuable, you don't want to be using borrowed money to do this, but if you were to invest, and I'm not recommending really anything other than maybe Bitcoin, all this shrapnel, all these crummy coins, those are, I wish I hadn't, whatever, could have, would have, should have. I haven't lost that much money on them, but I'll throw $100 at something, and sure enough, it goes into nothing. But Bitcoin has done pretty well. In fact, Bitcoin goes in a cycle, and right now the cycle said it's not as high yet, but it's going to be hitting it probably by just after the first of the year or so. So it's a dangerous time to be avoiding or in jumping into Bitcoin at this point. But anyway, that's why people are driven to that. So where this ties back to this course is when we talk about budgeting. In order for you to be, financially solvent and have money to invest and not be just a spender, not be just a saver, and actually be an investor, you need to have proper budgeting to live within your means. And I know I'm acting like that's just do that. I realize, money is tight for everybody, but you definitely need to avoid depreciating assets. And when you do spend money, to the max extent possible, if you're going to spend all of your money every dime, money in a house or money in something that has, or just true investments in stocks and things like that, but vehicles, just consumer goods that just depreciate, it's just going to be very difficult, and you're going to end up at the end of the day not being where you need to be. Again, I'm not shilling for the Coinbase in this case, but they've got kind of an interesting take here, because when people talk about things getting more expensive, let's just watch this just for a second.
In 2012, you need 30,000 Bitcoin to buy this house. A decade later, it had only cost you 20 Bitcoin. And today, it could be yours for 5. If home prices keep falling in Bitcoin, why do they keep rising in dollars?
Anyway, so if you are into crypto, there's plenty of places to go. Coinbase is not bad, but anyway, I'm not shilling for them. But when people say, "Oh man, your Coinbase is so much more valuable," is it, or is the dollar, worth considerably less than it used to be? The parity between the two. Now, the reason why people might be driven to something like Bitcoin is that it's, well, you've got proof of work, proof of stake, a lot of discussions that are beyond it, but they say that it's not just fiat. But this debasement inflation thing with something like Bitcoin, since it's hardwired, there could only be 21 million in the supply, and at this point, it's still free of government control. So with those two facets, it should avoid these two items. With a fixed supply, there's no means of just printing more Bitcoin after it reaches its max. Anyway, I don't mean to make this all about crypto, but I'm just telling you, when you see things happening economically, there's reasons, there's sort of a cause and effect. But sticking within personal finance, what I want to talk about is how you're going to get there. Now, one of the ways you're going to get there is appreciating or is investing in appreciating assets. Well, if you want to do that, you need to prove your net worth. You need to prove that you got the assets and the income to go ahead and invest and purchase and get a loan and the rest of it. So there's certain documents that a bank, a financial institution, whatever, a mortgage broker will require, and typically they'll have their own forms where you'll have to punch the numbers into their little menu on some sort of app. But if you already have a handle on it, you can just basically type in the numbers you've already got. Also, keeping track of these sort of numbers will lead you, it'll incentivize you to invest more, I believe. I mean, investing can be kind of fun if you're making some money and if you get motivated. And hopefully, I'm not saying it's a great thing, but some of you are going to be motivated by a small portion of useful greed. That means you might forego a few things because you want to save money. If you can adopt that mindset, as opposed to spending every dollar you got, that's kind of useful. Create a statement by recording your revenues and expenses over a period of time. So cash flow, we're dealing with just cash flow. This is just kind of making the bad men go away in terms of getting your bills paid. We're not talking, this is keeping track of your cash flow is going to keep track of your day-to-day expenses so that you can have some extra money available to invest. So net cash flows, inflows minus outflows. So again, these are sort of operating expenses. You've all seen businesses that are super successful from a distance. You go, wow, that thing's doing well, and then all of a sudden they fail and they're out of business, and you are kind of curious what led to that. Well, a lot of times it has to do with cash flow. They've got a great business model, but they've got some weird debt structure, and they can't service the debt. They can't pay their day-to-day bills, and they can't make their payroll, and they go out of business because they didn't have their cash flow set up properly. You can also do this with investing in a home. If you go a little too far over the top and your mortgage is such that you can't even fund your living expenses, you maybe have a problem. But if you can find that sweet spot and max it out, a home obviously is is an appreciating asset. So you'll be better off in the long run, but you got to get to the long run before you can enjoy it. Okay, so we're looking at a person, Stephanie Spratt. She's got her disposable income, and then she's got just sort of these token amounts in here. Now, again, these are nominal, and you may differ, but probably different categories here are what you want more. Recreation is kind of a broad category when it's the largest one and you don't have it specified. If you're trying to figure out how to kind of get more out of life in terms of recreation. Also, if you wanted to set up some sort of sub account, like you've got a big trip coming up, and rather than just spend, and then all of a sudden the month of your big trip, you go into horrible debt that month. Maybe if you set up a sort of a little savings fund. I remember when I was a kid, my parents did not have much money at all, and my mom had some sort of Christmas savings account thing set up, and we always had a good Christmas because they didn't have much money, but you put $50 or $100, in there, and sure enough, come Christmas time, she had that money set aside. So the same's kind of true with vacations. And obviously, this isn't the emergency fund, but if I was spending $600 a month on recreation, I kind of want to dive down into that a little bit. Create a statement, revenues, expenses. So revenues, how much money you're making. Expenses are what you're spending on. Sorry, things rolling on me. Net cash flows. Okay, so we're rolling the wrong way. Staging your career path. So yeah, there's an expectation that hopefully, your money coming in will go up over time. If you took out college loans, as you get those paid off, also that will help career retirement. But not everybody keeps on this mold, on this, template. A lot of people find that they work in retirement. Some work out of necessity, which is not a good thing, but other people work because they enjoy it, and it does keep them active and maybe live a little bit longer and enjoy life a little bit more. Type of job, but yeah, your skills should probably go up, and your demand for your skills. Again, not to throw a whatever, but AI is coming in here. You've got to make sure your skills are either you're running the AI system or you have skills that are not AI related. But if your skills are easily replicated by AI, one of my daughters just graduated from Oklahoma State, and they had a big controversy with, go figure, all the kids using ChatGPT to write their term papers. And my sort of larger issue, the macro issue, is what good is a degree that your final paper can be generated better by ChatGPT than the students? I mean, the students were looking very myopically at just the specific problem of the ChatGPT, but I'm just like, yeah, what how is your, what skills you're offering to the employer that the employer needs, something done that can be replicated by ChatGPT and not have to put up with your salaries and your sick days and your HR concerns. Wow. So it's going to be tough. Number of earners. So yeah, maybe it is more efficient. The biggest wealth killer out there is probably divorce, just maintaining separate households and all the trauma of dividing everything up. There's a lot of people, especially dudes, living in crappy apartments because of some ugly divorce. It's bad on all sides, but I'm just saying. I know guys who have gone from doing quite well to kind of regretting whatever led to the divorce. Factors affecting cash flows, size of the outflow, yeah. Age, personal consumption behavior. So budgeting, really, the necessity for budgeting relates to this. Some people are fairly thrifty, and some people like to spend. And I don't want to be, the one that's trying to encourage everybody everybody to be ultra frugal, but I think there are ways you can enjoy things without spending a tremendous amount of money in depreciating assets. But anyway, and it just has to do with, especially on consumer goods. If you can avoid depreciation, that's a good thing. That being said, everything in Alaska, used cars and used everything, people don't know what stuff is worth. It's typically way overpriced, sometimes priced fairly, and a few times priced. But yeah, just because you're buying something used doesn't mean it's a better deal, that's for sure. But if you can even go as far as, buying a vehicle from the lower 48 and bringing it up or whatever, but just minimize that amount of money that you're putting into assets that are not generating, any sort of appreciation. So this is what they're showing. Yeah, just a little college money, career that's completely level. I know what you're saying. This is, this was written by somebody in the retirement age looking back on their lives. You all are in a different realm, I mean, the good news is there's no plagues going on. There's no, famine right now. So in terms of civilization, you're still winning over, thousands and thousands of years. But yeah, in terms of the situation the boomers had just back in the 50s, a little different. Creating a budget. So cash flow statement, budgeting and cash flow. So budgets are to deal with just these immediate needs, surpluses and deficiencies. So here she is. Actual amounts last year. How'd she do? Or last month, I'm sorry. Yeah, healthcare, insurance expense. We're trying to budget for healthcare. You might budget for your healthcare insurance, but the actual expenses out of pocket, that's tough. That's going to be more in an emergency fund category. Car expenses, something maybe broke. Again, perhaps maybe a car expense thing of, rather than whatever, maybe set up some sort of fund, a couple, $3,000 to $5,000. And again, the cars you guys drive, I can get through an emergency like that with a lot of modern vehicles. It's obviously a bit more than that. I've got broke Forerunners that I've got one in standby right now, ready to go, and it's all I got to do is put insurance on it. The other one I drive, it's I'll drive it till the wheels fall off, and then I'll put the other one into service. So I've got a different outlook. I can't be bothered with whatever bells and whistles and new cars. Just again, boomer mind doesn't work like that. I do not like little warning lights and stuff. Okay, car expenses. So, and then recreation. So right at $600. I'm kind of dubious of this whole recreation account, if you haven't noticed. Okay. Stephanie's cash flows. So overall, not unusual expected. This month's cash situation. At least she's got a plan. Did she hit it perfectly? No. You're never going to do that perfectly. But if you see these variances in here, those are the things that might warrant some sort of separate fund, and it just kind of gives you the peace of mind, again, if the vehicle breaks, okay, I've got a little money to cover it. The exception to that, obviously, is going to be healthcare. Most of you are young and healthy and good to go. Hopefully you've got insurance. But, back in the old days, you used to be able to get like a catastrophic care policy. Those all kind of went away, unfortunately. If those ever came back, that would be a great thing, because then you could say, look, I don't care about small stuff, but if I'm, diagnosed with something, and again, I know younger generations are more fatalistic than most of us. It would be nice to have a policy like that. But I dare say that trying to put healthcare into a budget is very difficult, because it's going to be an all or nothing thing. It's either going to cost you nothing this month or a lot of money. But the odds of that happening are very, very small. Small shortages made it from the checking account, budgets, provide a warning, assessing the accuracy. So yeah, comparison, and then come up. And I think maybe smaller categories. Now, as you know, and we'll talk about this in the video, there's lots of apps to do this. It's not that hard. It's a lot easier. And you can really get down in the weeds if you want to. Forecast cash flow, allow expenses, create annual budget. Keep in mind, if you're using any of the apps, obviously if most of these apps are free, which as you know, if it's free, then it's not necessarily free. You're going to be bombarded with emails and everything else trying to get you to get their service. You are the product at that point. But fair enough. We can all move those things to spam and not sign up for a bunch of subscription unneeded services. But from a marketing standpoint, you all are a super valuable quantity. If some company like Fidelity or Vanguard can get you on as a young customer, they've got a customer for life, and they know that. So they're gonna offer you a lot of free stuff and a lot of good deals as incentives to get you on. So not necessarily a bad deal, but be aware. It's not out of pure benevolence that they're being so generous and giving you such great advice. It's because they're trying to cultivate you as a customer. So as long as you recognize that, there's no harm in it. Okay. So again, going back on the budget. Yep. Outflows, inflows. Improving the budget. Yep. Yeah, overly dependent on it. That will sort of take care of itself. If you keep borrowing money from your friends, those friends will go away. Create a budget and stay with it. Learn now, and when the numbers get bigger, hopefully as your career goes up, you'll be there. If you get tied into a bunch of debt, recurring debt, like payments for something that's literally a depreciating asset, again, there's probably some car dealer out there in the student populace that's wishing I were dead right now. But I'm telling you, that is the huge drain on wealth. Okay, so now we've looked at it over the course of a month. Over a year. Getting clothing. Recreation. So anyway, you see how you can do it. The apps can do it way better than some slide. So is Mint the best one? I don't know. You can look at it. So Mint, their deal is TurboTax, Credit Karma, Mint, QuickBooks, MailChimp. That's the devil right there. But anyway, TurboTax is pretty useful. We'll talk more about that as we go through taxes. But unfortunately, Intuit, this master company, you understand why your taxes are so complicated and why it's so convoluted. Because Intuit's making a ton of money on it. They are going to lobby to make it, they're going to let any constituent group know that, oh man, you want that, complicated tax situation so that you pay more taxes. Anyway, but if they give you this free app and then they bombard you with all these other items, especially Credit Karma, again, free service, but man, you're giving all your data away to, these companies that are now going to start hitting you with their other products, and maybe they'll sign you up for a free subscription, knowing full well that you'll forget about it, and all of a sudden now you'll end up with a paid subscription. Anyway, sign up for free, and then maybe it turns into a subscription a little later. So anyway, the good thing about the internet and apps is as the whole process of basically enshittification takes place, there's always a better app out there that emerges. So I'm not going to say what app would be the best, because that could change over the course of even during this course. Personal balance sheet. So now we're looking beyond cash flows and we're looking at what you own, so your assets and liabilities, and that's going to give you your net worth. So when you go to the bank, or, well, you may be going to a bank, but hopefully, I'm thinking optimistically with y'all that you're going to go to the mortgage broker. And again, you should kind of have that relationship with a mortgage broker. I've got my guy who, I call him on the phone and I get Christmas cards from him and all that. And it's obviously he gets some fees when I buy some property or something, but he also keeps me aware of, hey, why aren't you refinancing now? Rates have dropped or whatever, and he can make the loan situation kind of go smoother. It really helps to not use the online mortgage broker in most cases, because the local guy can kind of help you out. The loan's going to get sold off in the end of the day. It's going to go to Freedom Mortgage, or I don't know, some Wells Fargo or somebody like that. Whether that be, even if you use Rocket or somebody else, typically all those mortgage bankers that you see public facing, they just get the loan going and then they sell it off to one of the big lenders. But anyway, if I was going in to talk to him, I would have a list of assets and liabilities, and it sort of establishes your reputation with them and gets them kind of on side and let them know that you're serious about it. And also for your own sake, you can go, oof, yeah, I should probably have a net worth. I should probably have, assets, or if I do have liabilities, they should be better quality liabilities. A big mortgage loan is totally different than a big credit card debt. Anyway, so liquid assets. And, the test will kind of harp on this. Liquid assets, the big exception to liquid is real estate. Real estate is not liquid. Real estate's kind of takes some doing. You've got appraisals, inspections, you got delay times. It takes a while to turn real estate into cash, meaning it is not liquid. Household assets, yeah, you're going to dump them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something. Yeah, it's not like, even a car is, well, I wouldn't say it's incredibly liquid, but it's going to sell a whole lot quicker than a home. But anyway, liquidity doesn't say anything to the soundness of selling an asset, the wisdom. It doesn't do any sort of market timing. Stocks are quite liquid. I could sell some stock and have the cash out. There's settling times, but within a couple, 3 days. But do I want to sell the stock? Not the stocks I've got. My stuff is volatile. You sell at the high, you buy the dips. So just because it's liquid doesn't mean that it's something I want to reach out and grab. Whereas cash, the value of cash is always the same or decreasing, as we've talked about, from inflation. But anyway, market value for these assets, the amount you receive. Yeah, most people overestimate how much their car is worth, and especially furniture and things like that. The values are, you need a buyer. Something is only worth what somebody's willing to give you. When somebody says, my whatever is worth this amount of money, really? Is there a person willing to give you that amount of money? Because if not, it's not worth that amount of money. Investments, bonds and stocks. I will talk about bonds. Basically are a debt position from let's say you got a big corporation and they want to get some money. And it can also be a government entity in this case too. Anyway, what they'll do is they'll say, we don't want to issue stock. We don't want to dilute the company and all. We want to just get a loan. And, it's a big loan. and banks don't have those kind of resources typically. So what we're going to do to finance this, to get capital to, or do whatever they want to do to raise the funds, they're going to sell bonds. So they'll sell a bond. So basically what you'll do is you'll buy that bond. You'll give them $20,000 for a bond. And what they'll do, they'll take your $20,000 and they'll start giving you bond payments every, quarterly, 6 months, annually, whatever. And say they give you, $500 a year on that $20,000 bond. And they give you that $500 every year. And then at the end of 20 years, they give you your $20,000 back. So they've essentially rented your money. That's what a loan is. It's like renting a car. Renting money is what a loan or a bond is. Stock, on the other hand, stock is actually a position in the company. You own a portion of the company. So anyway, if you have stocks or bonds, you would list them on your balance sheet. Like I say, I'm not a big fan of bonds because the interest rates are not that exciting. They talk about bonds a lot in the financial world, but that's typically the bond traders, the big boys that are selling these things back and forth. That's who's making the money on them. The actual bond holders, not so much. Mutual funds are related to stocks. What you do, if you buy an individual company, like let's say you think that, AI is going to be the next big thing, and you invest in, a single AI company, and it happens to be the one that's the winner and becomes the dominant company. Well, you did quite well. But if you happen to invest in another company that doesn't do well, although the whole AI industry goes up, judging that AI is going to go up is a much safer, much more predictable bet. So if I could buy a mutual fund that has like 10 AI companies, 10 separate companies, and I buy that one mutual fund that contains all those AI companies, then I'm not so concerned that I get the individual winner. I can take the safer bet and just buy that one. So I get some diversification, and I mitigate my risk, and it's not a bad thing. And so that's what mutual funds are. Now, mutual funds, I just gave you one example of a mutual fund in a sector. But mutual funds can be done in, geographical. They can be done, you can say, I want international funds. I want global. Global and international, not exactly the same. International means everywhere but the United States. Global means everywhere to include the United States. You can say just high tech. You can say an index fund. We're going to talk a lot about mutual funds later on, but most of you probably already have mutual funds, so a good vehicle, super easy to buy, super friendly websites. Just really, if you're not really into the personal finance thing, but you want to participate, these are pretty much for you. Real estate holdings. So your personal home could obviously be, a good real estate holding, but the problem with that is you got to live somewhere. So it's great that your house is worth $1 million now, but can you sell it and get that $1 million? Well, no. So when we're talking about your personal home, still go on your balance sheet, but more interesting from an investment perspective are the ones that you can actually sell, or have an income associated with them. Again, cleaning toilets, fixing roofs, yeah. But, not a bad investment. A lot of people made good money on them. Liabilities. This is what you owe. Long-term and short-term. They don't say, I use those terms interchangeably, but in fact, it's not actually stated here. Current liabilities would be less than a year, which is synonymous with short-term. The reason why I prefer short-term and long-term is because that's what the IRS uses. If you have an investment that does well, you have to pay taxes on it at a different rate based upon whether it's short or long-term. And so, anyway, It makes a difference, but current liabilities, debts paid within a year, long-term debts paid over a year. Net worth is the difference between those. Again, liabilities, you need more specificity, not just the long-term versus short-term, but you need the quality. What interest rate? What's the underlying asset? Again, not all debt is bad. Creating a personal balance sheet, so that gives you your net worth, monitor changes, and perhaps motivate you, perhaps be useful when you're trying to buy something, trying to show your net worth. Here's what she's got. So again, fairly small numbers is what we're looking at. Household assets, stocks, pretty cool. She's got, not just a spender. She's actually got some investments. Credit card balance. You don't want to be carrying a balance. You want to be a convenience user. Credit cards are a great thing. They're a necessary thing. But if you're carrying a balance, you need to pay that off before you can start investing. You can't hope to outperform the interest rate being charged you on your credit card. Even the best investor is going to fail at that one. Long-term viabilities, net worth. Okay. Changes personal balance sheet. Now here she's going to buy a new car. Assets increase, but her liabilities. Yeah, so not a great example. I mean, again, everybody's in a different situation. I bought a new car back in 2000. That was the last time. I really don't. Whatever. Present situation. So she's got 500, 3,500, yada yada. And here, if she purchases a new car, assets increased dramatically, but so did the debt, and not good debt. So there's a concept which you guys are probably more familiar with than I am in terms of being underwater, where you owe more on the vehicle than what it's worth. Not unusual situation. So the total liabilities or net worth in this case may have been unchanged. But if she's underwater on the vehicle, the net worth is going to decrease because the asset's not worth as much as the liability. Impact of the economy. Well, yeah. This kind of goes without saying. Net worth can be negative. Certainly. Relationships between cash flow and wealth. Yeah. Supply and demand. What you want to do is you want to maintain your cash flow so that you can, enable your lifestyle and put money into investments. And, like I say, cash flow is a necessary evil. It's to cover your expenses and free up capital that can be invested. So this first statement is essentially correct. That wealth is, technically it's correct. But again, it uses liabilities in sort of a pejorative sense. My point, if I think I've made it a few times, is that not all credit is bad. Buying things on credit, if the credit rate is less than the amount the item's appreciated, well, that's how wealth is generated. That's why investments and things like that are so sensitive to investing, because the wealthy use credit, they use borrowed money to make money. So, for example, here mid-September or so, they're expecting the interest rate to be lowered a bit, and if that were to happen, then the economy is going to continue to move along. If it goes up, then it will, hurt the economy. So anyway, net cash flows can be used to decrease liabilities, which will increase net worth. Yeah, that's one way to do it.
My preferred method is to increase the asset, buy assets that are appreciating in value. So, two ways to get to that, and then net worth can change even if cash flows are zero. So, but if you've got zero cash flow, how are you paying your expenses? How are you servicing your debt? So, but anyway, again, technically correct statements, but not that useful. Did I go the wrong way? Yeah. Okay. Your cash flows minus your outflows equals your net. Yep. Value of your assets, value of your liabilities equals your net worth. So this kind of ties it together. Analysis of personal balance sheet. Yeah. Good idea to know where you're at, especially cash flow. If your cash flow is screwed up, you are going to know it in a heartbeat. Now, this liquidity ratio, this is more of a long-term ratio. Liquid assets versus, liquid assets, current liabilities. So, yeah, you'll quickly figure out if that's out of kilter because the money you have available, liquid, available to pay the current debts. So, personal balance sheet, yep, give you a 2. So these absolute ratios, again, your generation is different in terms of some of the numbers that were, from a boomer's perspective, say, oh, that's just, hey, that's how some people are living. That's just the way it is. The reality of most jobs not having pensions, wages being out of kilter with the price of assets. It puts people in different situations. So they may have these ideal ratios, but in the real world, you can't always achieve that. Debt level measured by debt to asset ratio. So here there's $2,000 worth of debt, $9,000 in assets. So higher ratio, higher debt relative to assets. Yep. And then savings rate. So they'll talk about a savings rate, but again, it doesn't, the middle class are the savers. There's a lot of things that take place in our economy, whether it's debasement or kind of pumping the stock market all the time to keep a lot of people kind of happy. People may say, wow, prices seem to be going up. I don't understand. They say inflation's low, but man, my 401k is still going up quite a bit, and they're comfortable. But what they don't realize is that assets are outpacing, well, unless they're holding the assets. But anyway, if you don't have any assets and you're relying on wages for your sole source of income, you're in a tough spot. Time value of money concepts. We'll go through this quite quickly because what this is about is, back in the day, they used to use a lot of slide rules. They used to have, charts and tabular data, and now with apps, the internet, the rest of it, you have the ability to just sort of plug the numbers in as you need a certain value. So we're not going to spend time memorizing formulas because they're not very useful. We will talk about the concepts, value influenced by, so, you give me $100 now, it's more valuable than $100 2 years from now. Why? Because I can put that $100 to work. And if I just do nothing with it other than invest it in some sort of, savings type, proper investment. A bank savings account, actually, the value may not keep up with inflation. But if I invest it wisely and I get at a rate that outpaces inflation, then I'm making money. So, value of given amount of money is generally greater the earlier it's received. Yeah. And the earlier you start saving, the more quickly. So the time value of money, all this in the charts, the Excel spreadsheets on the first day. Kind of recovering this, different ways to, different problems you might have in life where you want to know how much, say somebody gives you a certain amount of money, how much it's going to be worth in the future. That'd be a single dollar amount, a lump sum, and or it may be a series of payments. If it's a series, then that's typically called an annuity. Annuity is also a term used in insurance. Annuity means I give, some investor, some insurance company, say $10,000, and they start paying me $100 a month for the rest of my life. That is an annuity. Sometimes people find that useful. And because of the complexity of the program and all that other stuff, they're typically sold by insurance companies. But anyway, different ways that this can be done. Sometimes you want to know, I need a big chunk of money in the future. How much do I need to start saving now? Or I need a big chunk of money in the future. How much do I need to put aside right now rather than a series of payments in one lump sum? How much do I need to do? So different reasons you might have, different needs for this. Let's see what else. Compounding, we talked about compounding. That's earning interest on interest. So that's what makes things so powerful. Now, again, compounding works against you or for you. Ideally, it's working for you, but if you're somebody with a huge credit card bill, yeah, it's working against you, most definitely, which you'll figure out. And the interest rate of that compounding from the credit card is horrible. So, anyway, determine the amount of money, future value, we deposited today. Yep, need the money, the interest rate, number of years. And given that, you can plug it into the app or you can plug it into a formula. Future value, this has to do with a, same sort of thing. How much saved today, accumulate over time. Can be calculated using a table, financial calculator, or more importantly, an app. So don't worry about all of that. This I and N, again, they're trying to do this like you're going to do these complex calculations, which that's an academic thing. We're not going there. So suppose you want to know how much money you'll have in 5 years. You invest $5,000 now and earn a rate of return of 4%. So you do that. Present value is the $5,000, and then interest rate 4%. Enter it on the table. Again, you can find these tables out there, but they're just, it's more important to find out what to invest in. You've got a certain amount of time as your most, other than money, time's your most precious value, asset. And if you're going to waste a whole bunch of time replicating charts and graphs that are done quicker with more variables on an app, you're probably better off. Using the information example, we can turn in 5 years, your money will be worth $5,000. So how's that? That's because of compound interest. Again, a bunch of different things that we're not going to worry about. Present value, N is going to be the number of years. Interest in the years, again, payments, rounding error. The other thing with an app, for example, if you're looking at how much is my house payment going to be for a certain mortgage, and you calculate that out on a chart, that's all well and fine, but you go to an app online and it's going to maybe ask for your zip code, and it's going to know the tax rate of the locality, and it's going to have a rough approximation of the insurance, and it's going to give you a more accurate value. So not only is it far easier, but it's much more complete. And there's whatever bespoke, a tailored type of calculator for what you're needing. So much better. Impact of longer term, just as we found out with the whole compound interest charts, that if you go out for a tremendous number of periods, man, that compound interest, even at 4%, kicks butt. Now keep in mind, if inflation's 4%, your buying power just went down a lot. You thought you needed whatever amount of money, and now you need a lot more. This is a fallacy sometimes when people. Investment property is great. All real estate is good. I mean, you get to enjoy it for yourself. But, for example, I've got a nephew, right? He's got a house. I don't know what he paid for it. Let's say, $250,000. And he, probably more like $500,000. So anyway, he buys this home for $500,000. But his dream home was $1 million, right? So, but you got to get in the market. So he jumps in. He buys the $500,000 house for now, wants the $1 million house. Well, the good news is that his $500,000 house has doubled, and now it's worth $1 million. But guess what happened to the $1 million house? It doubled too. So now it's worth $2 million. So where is he? He's $1 million behind. Now, the worst case scenario is for him to set on the market and stay in a rental property, because now he'd be even more. Well, what are we doing here? 1,500 or 101.5 behind? That's a lot. So anyway, you're now if you had, let's say the same nephew of mine, let's say he bought rather than $500,000 house, he bought two $250,000 condos. His condo goes up, doubles 500,000. That's kind of cool, although he had to live in a condo, whatever. But he can't sell it because he needs a place to live. But that excess property, that investment property, that rental property, maybe he made a little bit of rental income on it. But also, he doesn't need to live in that house, so he can actually sell it. So he can pull that 500 grand out, so he's actually closer. If he would have bought two condos, would have scraped up some more money. Again, this is getting other people to kind of pay for your lifestyle. And again, it's borrowed money. Even if he had to borrow to buy that third condo, if the whatever interest rate he was paying, if he did well, perhaps it went up a bunch. And anyway, you can see what's happening. It all works out, but you gotta think broadly and keep in mind all the different moving parts. Okay, impact of higher interest rate. Oh yeah. That's why interest or real estate right now, I wouldn't say it's completely depressed, but it's not where it should be, because mortgage rates are still quite high. There's those, again, I keep bad-mouthing the boomers, but a lot of those folks have got, mortgages locked in and down at 3%. You're not getting, you're paying double that. So it's gonna, supply and demand. There's fewer people can be in the market. It's going to depress home prices to a certain extent. They're still going up, but not as much as they would be if interest rates are lower. Future value of a single dollar. Yep. So again, I don't mean to just gloss over this stuff, but I think these are fairly simple concepts. Power of compounding. Again, look at the charts. They make a far better example, far more valid demonstration, and just eye-watering. Twisted logic about long-term debt. Depends on the debt. Not all debt is the same. Again, I've got a brother. Interest rates are 3%. We both had mortgages down at that rate. He's like, I'm going to pay my house off quickly so I can be all debt-free. I'm like, screw that. I'm going to ride that 3% debt. Actually, it's 2.85 forever. I'm not paying that off. I'd make half payments if they'd let me do it at that rate. And that only is valid if I, invest that money that would have been used for these extra payments. You go blow it on, hookers and blow. You should have paid off that mortgage. But if you're disciplined and you're investing, you're doing much better. Discounting, that's the notion of looking back at previous numbers. So process of obtaining present values from a future amount. They also use that term in sometimes in interest rates where they're discounting. Anyway, so if you're looking at a present value of a dollar amount, so $5,000 in the future, how much is that now? Hopefully, if you're invested wisely, maybe it's down around 2,500 or something like that. To determine present value, you need all these same numbers: interest rates, amount of money, number of years, the standard players. But again, they want to come up with a bunch of different PVIF, present value, interest factor. I mean, it's not that complex. If you're good at math, apply it to something that's useful. Arbitrage, different items for selling for different prices in different markets. The stock market kind of exploded a few years ago with a bunch of academics, a bunch of math kind of folks get in there. I've gotten in there and have done amazing work in terms of algorithms and all this other stuff. They felt like they were underpaid university professors because they had these genius level skills in mathematics, and now they've applied it to finance. If you want to get rich, that would be one way of doing it. Slogging through calculators that are already available is not. You need 50,000, 5 years by making a single payment today, 7%. How much is it going to cost you? Bada bing, 35,650. Okay. Annuity. So now it's a series of payments rather than a lump sum. Same sort of thing. Again, a bunch of needless stuff. So 150,000 in the lottery. Will receive. So it's an annuity. You're going to get that 150,000 every year for 20 years, 7%. This is an ordinary. It's worth $6 million. So if they say, do you want $5 million now or $6 million? That depends on how good you are investing. You need to analyze that and figure that number out. Again, discounting it's a useful term, but it's not exactly plain English. Present value of future annuity. This guy's going to get 82,000 at the end. A lot of lottery winners. I mean, if you're doing lotteries, by definition, you're not good at math, or you never would have got involved. But anyway, that being aside, financial firm offers you 700,000. Should you do it? And you can quickly figure out. Yeah. But again, you got to come in there with an interest rate that, are you better than they are? What's the given interest rate? Can you get the interest rate, or is it going to be more or less? So, anyway. Tax implications of that big lump sum payment. There's a lot more moving parts than just the absolute dollars, too. If you, take on $1 million in a year, or, $6 million, the IRS is going to love you. If you spread that out, again, it's going to depend on your individual situation. It's going to, you're going to, if you won the lottery, spend a little money, get a CPA, and get that sorted out. And because it's going to depend on a lot of factors to include the current tax code. Okay. Yep. Maybe more motivated to save because you can see the reward. So that's why it is kind of nice to have some of these documents that you've prepared. You go, wow, I am getting rich. Wow, there is a net worth. It motivates you. If you're losing money and you're poor, you're not even going to want to think about money. You're going to ignore it, and it's going to eat you alive. How much should I save? How much should I attempt to save per month? Again, a good percentage is what's nice, because the percentage is it's kind of agnostic of how much money you're making. If you say, well, I'll put aside, $10 a month because I'm not making very much right now, but I'm going to get started. Well, if convert that to a percentage, and then as you start making money, that same percentage of your income will increase as your income goes up. And again, you don't have to feel guilty about not being able to save when you're necessarily in college, especially if you're going to roll it onto debt. You don't want to be necessarily investing and then taking out debt that's at a higher rate than what you're earning. Homework. Okay, finally getting to it. So, yep, a couple problems on cash flow. And again, the book should be coming around. Most of you should have a copy of it. I will, at a certain point, put out a document that shows what the different problems are. I'll give you like a little hint or whatever. Put the question down there so in case the page numbers don't line up for you, which may be the case depending on the edition of the book, and that'll be good. And that's it for the week.